Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the Boise Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. As you look around, those of us who are here in person, you might notice that things look and perhaps sound a little different. We are in continuing fire cleanup mitigation, and so all of our acoustic panels were removed this week. And so I just want to share that information with you. That is why the aesthetics are a little off, and that is why the sound is a little off. And Mike Lemieux has worked so hard to try to get things as balanced and calibrated as possible. But we are just learning to roll with it and put on our best, most flexible selves. So to the folks that helped create our chancel space and spent some time redoing all of that yesterday, thank you so very much. Welcome to this community, this spiritually diverse, justice-seeking religious community, proclaiming the power of love at the core of our living tradition. Love of neighbor, love for ourselves, and love for our planet. Whoever you are and wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. Whatever faiths you have known, if any, whatever doubts you carry, you are welcome here. Whomever you love, however you identify, you are welcome here. Everyone is welcome here. And we're working on printing our banner so we can hang it up. I'm the Reverend Sara LaWall. I use she, her pronouns. It is my great honor to serve all of you as your minister. Joining me today is Janet McClenahan, serving as our celebrant. And our special guest musicians, George Raino and his friend Cindy, with some beautiful music for us this morning. Let's take a moment and welcome our online community, our friends joining us on Zoom. We wave at the camera, and of course, friends on Zoom, we invite you to turn your cameras on for a moment so we can welcome you and see your beautiful faces here in our space. Good morning. Good morning, Jeannie. Good morning, David. Good morning, Steve and Diane. It's so good to see all of your faces. And it's only because I can't read everybody's name because I need new glasses that I'm not welcoming everyone by name. Jackie, good morning, and Bob, Huntley, and John. It's so wonderful. Thank you all for joining us online, reminding us that we worship together as one beloved community beyond the walls of this fellowship. A special welcome to any newcomers among us, those of you that might be visiting us for the first or second time. We are so glad that you have chosen to check us out this morning, and we know that it takes a lot of courage to do that. We invite you to introduce yourselves to us during our hospitality time after the service, if you're with us in person, or introduce yourselves right in the chat if you're on Zoom, so that we can warmly welcome you and begin to get to know you. And we have some newcomer forms in each of our entryways, and we'll post a link in the chat that you can fill out to keep up to date with all that is happening in our fellowship. I do have a few quick announcements. First, for those newcomers, still new-ish comers, who've been through our Inquirer series and are ready to become members, we will be holding a new member ceremony on April 6th, which also happens to be the kickoff Sunday for our annual giving drive. I can't believe it's almost here. So it's going to be a big and delightful full day. If you are interested in becoming a member, please see Nancy in our office or send her an email, and she'll be delighted to make sure that you're included in that process. And then when we gather for our kickoff of our pledge drive, we are going to do that on April 6th with an all-community potluck and a conversation together about our finances. Yeah, that's right, because that is what our pledge drive is all about, and we want to share some important information and help orient all of you to how we structure ourselves financially. Today, the board is in. Your board members are going to host a couple of chat with the board, informal opportunities during our hospitality time. this month and next month as we move ahead towards our annual meeting, towards our vote on the Chelan property and our vote on our budget. So if you want to chit-chat with your board members today, please, you can see Rob Ham. Where are you, Rob? Yes, thank you. Rob's waving back there. And Jan Salisbury, who will be in our hospitality room, ready to answer all of your questions. We wanted to construct like a peanuts, the board is in 5 cents, but we didn't get that far. We've been cleaning up fire. At this hour, every week, we center and ground ourselves by lighting a flaming chalice. In small towns and big cities, in living rooms and ornate sanctuaries, many of our sibling Unitarian Universalists are also lighting a flaming chalice, the symbol of our free faith, reminding us that we are part of a great community of faith and love. As we light our chalice here in the sanctuary, if you have a candle or a chalice nearby, those of you who are in our virtual community, I invite you to light that chalice with us this morning and then share in the chat where it is you have lit your chalice. I invite us all to rise in body or spirit and sing together hymn number 128 in your gray hymnal, words also on our screens, For All That Is Our Life.
We come from and live on land considered sacred by many indigenous peoples, known as Bannock, Shoshone, Paiute, and many other tribes that lived here sustainably for thousands of years, inhabiting a vast region including much of Idaho.
We recognize the long history of the land, long before colonization, and acknowledge the ancient tribes whose names have been lost in history.
With this acknowledgement, we wish to demonstrate our commitment to dismantling the legacies of settler colonialism. We honor Indigenous peoples' connection to the land and support their right to sovereignty.
In the challenges of these truths, may we move through the world bringing justice in every way that we can, listening to the truths spoken to us by Native American peoples, making space for them to re-inhabit this place, and giving them back the resources they need to heal their communities.
Our spiritual theme for this month of March is living love through the practice of trust. Today's service explores the challenges and the value of trusting ourselves. So as we enter into this time of worship together, I invite us all to take a breath together. As you fill your body with breath, on each exhale, I invite you to let go of whatever burdens you carry with you just for this time together today. You can pick them up as you leave if you wish. Breathe, knowing that our breath restores us to ourselves, connects us to one another and to our planet. Our breath offers us an opportunity for stillness, to tune in to our spiritual center, to listen deeply to our heart's own longing. In the spirit of our theme of trusting ourselves this morning, I invite you to hear the words of our opening poem, the thines and the thous, as spoken to yourself. Thou art the song of my heart in the morning. Thou art the dawn of truth in my soul. Thou art the dew of the roses adorning. Thou art the woven whole. Thine is the grace to be steadfast in danger. Thine is the peace that none can destroy. Thine is the face of the need-riven stranger. Thine are the wings of joy. Thou art the deep, to the deep in me calling. Thou art a lamp where my feet shall tread. Thy way is steep past the peril of falling. Thou art my daily bread. Thine be the praise of my spirit uplifted. Thou art the sea to each flowing stream. Thine be the days that are gathered and sifted. Thou art the deathless dream.
you. You think with a name like McClenahan, I'd be Irish, but I'm not. But I could be. Our call to worship this morning is Psalm 23 for the moment, a recasting of Psalm 23 in the language of love from the Reverend Kevin Tarsa, who serves UU Community of the Mountains in Grass Valley, California. May I remember this tender moment, that love is my guide always, shepherding me toward ways of openness and compassion. I have what I need, really, with love at my side, above me, below me, in front of me, behind me, inside every cell of me. Love infused everywhere. Just when the weight of the world I inhabit threatens to drop me in place and press my hope down into the ground beneath me, love invites me to rest for a gentle while and leads the center of my soul to the quiet, still, restoring waters nearby that somehow I had not noticed. And so love, quietly, sets me once again on its tender and demanding path. Even when the walls close around me and the cries of death echo through untold corners, gripping my heart with fear and sadness, I know that all will be well, that I will be well. When love whispers near to me, glints at the corner of my eye, rests with gentle and persistent invitation upon my shoulders, yes, love blesses me. Even as the sources and symbols of my pain look on. Love blesses me from its infinite well. I turn and notice that goodness and kindness and grace follow me everywhere I go. I live in a house of love, love that will not let me go. I live in a house of love and always will. Come, let us worship together.
In this house of love, we make commitments to being a multi-generational community, a community of generosity, and a community of care and connection. And in that spirit, I would like to invite all of our young people, children, young people, young at heart, anyone who wants to come sit down on the floor for our time for all ages. Good morning. I like those shoes. Look at those. Good morning, everybody. It's so good to see your faces. I'm excited to be with you today. With you and your Squishmallows, Lilo and Stitch. I love seeing all the cool stuff up here. Good morning. Hi. Good morning, everybody. Ready to go. So our theme for the whole month of March is about trust, but today we're talking about trusting ourselves. Do you all know what that feels like? Do you trust yourselves? Most of the time, that's a fair answer, Cece, yeah. I think we would all agree with that, right? Do you trust yourselves all the time? It's a practice, right? We have to figure out how to do that. And our story today is about self-acceptance. So learning to love ourselves is one way that we can then also learn to trust ourselves, right? Those two kind of go together. And so this story, maybe it's one that you've heard before. It's a really favorite story of mine. This story is a story called Perfectly Norman by Tom Percival. And we have the pictures on the screen, so if you want to look along, you are welcome. Norman had always been normal. Perfectly normal. Perfectly normal Norman. Until Norman grew wings. Now, he'd always imagined growing taller or growing a beard like his dad, but wings? He couldn't wait to try them out. Wouldn't it be cool to have wings? I think it'd be cool. He was soon swooping around and having the most fun ever. But then his parents called him to dinner, and this was a problem. Because Norman had always been so normal. He didn't know how his parents would feel about his amazing, extraordinary wings. So he covered himself up in a big yellow coat and went to dinner. His parents didn't notice the wings, but they sure thought the coat was weird. It was even more weird during his bath and at bedtime. It was also really hot. But Norman decided that in order to remain normal, he just had to hide those wings forever and ever. So the next day, he went to the park. But the coat was so hot. It was too hot to allow him to play his favorite games. And so on and on it went. Car rides, watching kids at the pool, birthday parties, all of them unbearable. A bully even tried to pull off Norman's coat, and he had to run away all angry and hot-faced and sad. Yes, sad. That's how it feels. That's how bullies make us feel sometimes, right? The only time Norman ever felt normal anymore was when it rained. And he wished he'd never given up or grown his stupid wings. Wished he'd never had them. Then he looked up one day and he saw some birds flying above him, and he remembered this joy that he felt on his first flight with his wings. And he realized in that moment that it was really the coat that was making him miserable and not the wings. "Why don't you take that scruffy old thing off?" his parents asked. Norman looked at them curiously and smiled and nodded, and Norman smiled back. And then he threw off the coat and let his wonderful wings spread out. Norman leapt into the air, so thankful he was finally free of that coat. And soon, he notices other children also wearing heavy coats in the summer heat. They all looked up at Norman and then nervously at each other, and then the sky was filled with flying people and colorful wings, and Norman never felt so happy. And so Norman realized a really important lesson, a lesson that I hope we all keep realizing as much as possible in our lives. Norman realized there was no such thing as being perfectly normal. No such thing. But he was perfectly Norman, which is all he needed to be. Perfectly Norman. But you are not perfectly Norman. You are perfectly Cece. And I am perfectly Reverend Sarah. And you are perfectly Oliver. So let's remember every day that all we need to know is that there's no such thing as perfectly normal, but there is such thing as being perfectly ourselves, true and authentic to who we are, and trusting that that is good. Let's sing together as before you go off to your religious exploration spaces. I'll invite you all to stand with me as we sing our community blessing together.
When we give, we say yes to the natural cycle of abundance in our lives, trusting that there is enough and we can be part of the enough. We give to say yes to building beloved communities within and beyond our walls as we commit ourselves to do the work of justice and compassion for all people and our earth. Today, we share those gifts with our plate partner, the Pink Haven Coalition, a collective of trans organizers, mutual aid groups, progressive faith organizations, queer associations, and individual justice lovers committed to trans liberation, growing community defense, mutual aid, and alternative systems of care for gender diverse people. I invite the ushers to come forward. Our offering will be greatly received.
That was delightful. Thank you. As our ushers bring our offering gifts forward, I invite us all to join together in our collective blessing of our offering this morning. We bless these gifts so freely given. May generosity always be our companion as we walk the holy path toward ever greater passion and beauty. Thank you.
Our reading this morning is from the poet Rupi Kaur. This is, I am complete simply because I am imperfect. We think we are lost, while our fuller, found, and complete selves are somewhere in the future. We get on our hands and knees thinking self-improvement will help us reach them. But this finding ourselves BS is never going to end. I'm tired of putting off living until I have more information on who I am. I'm a new person every month, always becoming and unbecoming, and only to become again. Our fuller selves are not off in the future. They're right here, in the only moment that exists. I don't need fixing. I will be searching for answers my whole life, not because I'm a half-formed thing, but because I'm brilliant enough to keep growing. Everything necessary to live a vivid life already exists in me. I am complete simply because I'm imperfect.
Thank you, George and Cindy, for sharing your beautiful music with us this morning. A couple of weeks ago on a Sunday morning, I got in the car to drive here to church, and the radio happened to be tuned into some clearly Christian radio station. Now, I will acknowledge this happens sometimes when I'm busy switching between Bluetooth and the radio and I accidentally hit the wrong button. But I knew immediately this wasn't NPR. But as I was about to go and switch the station, I heard a snippet of the conversation that made me pause and listen. It was a talk show style format with two hosts, a man and a woman, and one of them said something like, "We cannot forget about redemption. We are all born sinners, and the only way to get through redemption is through Jesus Christ and 100% trust in God." The second agreed and said, "Yes." And those secular progressives, with that exact tone, will tell you all about free will and say you have an inner wisdom, and that is so wrong. And they both went on to dissect why that belief was so wrong and the critical importance of 100% faith and trust in Jesus and God, because we're all sinners, etc., etc. It was distressing, to say the least. Normally, I would have annoyingly switched the station and huffed myself into a better space, maybe a little self-righteous, I'll admit, about my own theology and religion on a Sunday morning on the way to church. But this time I listened just a little bit longer. I was so curious about this notion, and I felt myself filling up with a deep sadness, because I wondered if that's what they actually teach children, that you can't ever trust yourself, ever, that you have no inner wisdom or guidance, that you can only ever trust God. And then it made me wonder if we do a good job of teaching our children how to trust themselves and listen to their inner wisdom. I think about our OWL classes, the Our Whole Lives Sexuality Education program we offer, and I know we are really good about teaching all of the age-appropriate information, and really good about teaching risk analysis. And we're good about teaching self-confidence and personal boundaries. We Unitarian Universalists and other liberal religious traditions, we have that knowledge and reason thing down. But I am not entirely sure we do the best job teaching our young people, and perhaps even our adult people, how to trust yourself, how to listen to your own inner wisdom, that you do in fact have inner wisdom. I think we have more work to do there. From a very young age, I think most of us are taught, at least implicitly, if not explicitly, not to trust ourselves. We're taught to trust our parents, teachers, other authorities. Those raised in religion are taught to trust God and church leaders. We used to be taught to trust facts, to verify information, though that is getting a little bit more complicated and obscured. But we seem to be left to our own devices when it comes to learning how to trust ourselves. How did you learn to trust yourself? Have you learned yet? Who taught you? Or did you learn by trial and error, by having to experience the sometimes painful consequences of not trusting yourself? It seems like a more common experience. Do you trust yourself now? How do you know what trusting yourself feels like? I've been pondering those questions for myself quite a lot this month. And the question I keep coming back to is, how do I know when and how to trust myself? How do I know what that feels like? How do I learn to deploy the tools needed to ensure I feel confident trusting myself and not just blithely giving over trust to some other entity? It's a tricky question, especially right now, in this particular moment when we are being bombarded with wave after wave of terrible and terrifying news, information overload, direct threats to our lives and livelihoods and to our beloveds and to institutions that are supposed to serve us. It can be nearly impossible to listen to our own selves, let alone figure out how to try and trust ourselves. And yet now it seems is when we need to hone those skills and employ them even more. And the best way that I have found to do that, the best way most spiritual teachers have found to do that, is to get quiet, to just be with ourselves, to tune inward, to tune into our bodies and hearts and minds, and listen for that inner teacher, that inner wisdom that lives within us. And that is really hard to do when everything feels so big and loud and awful and heartbreaking and is pulling us in 100 different directions. It is just so hard to be still and get quiet these days. But perhaps it is even more important to do it and to carve out that time with just ourselves. Author, spiritual teacher, and Quaker Parker Palmer offers some of the best wisdom on this subject. He maintains that our inner wisdom lives within our souls. And when we experience the challenges of life, pain and grief and depression and anxiety, perhaps much of what many of us are experiencing right now, we can recognize and even feel and know our souls to be tough, resilient, resourceful, savvy, and self-sufficient. Our soul, he says, knows how to survive in hard places. But Parker Palmer also reminds us that our souls are quite shy. He writes, like a wild animal, the soul seeks safety in the dense underbrush, especially when other people are around. If we want to see a wild animal, he says, we know that the last thing we should do is go crashing through the woods yelling for it to come out. But if we will walk quietly into the woods, sit patiently at the base of a tree, breathe with the earth, and fade into our surroundings, the wild creature we seek might put in an appearance. And so it is with our shy soul, which is the home of our inner wisdom. He then reminds us then that we need to cultivate spaces for ourselves and in groups with others who know how to sit quietly in the woods with each other and wait for the shy soul to show up. In such a space, we are freed to hear our own truth, touch what brings us joy, become self-critical about our faults, and take risky steps toward change, knowing that we will be accepted no matter the outcome. For Palmer, this is the foundation of building what he has come to call circles of trust. This is how we learn to and practice trusting ourselves. And it is a difficult practice because it's not the way that we are conditioned to interact with one another. Society teaches that we need external help, always, whether in the form of material things, classes, expert advice, books, God. Rarely do we have spaces in our lives where people will simply offer us the gift of their presence and listening that we might quiet our own overactive brains and hear our inner teacher. I feel so blessed to have a few spaces like that in my life and in my ministry. I spent much of this last week at an annual ministers' study group in the woods at an Episcopal summer camp in Sonoma County. This is a small group of my UU colleagues from around the country. We come together every year to connect and to learn together. We choose a topic each year. 3 of us write long papers, 3 of us write short response papers, and the rest support our time together with worship and other programming. We always begin our time together with a long check-in, a chance for everyone to share whatever updates in their life and ministry, whatever is on their heart, 10 minutes or more per person, with no responses, no advice giving, just sharing and deep listening. We use many of the suggested structures and touchstones Parker Palmer identifies in his work around creating circles of trust. It's a beautiful, powerful space to be part of, and it also can feel a little bit unnerving at first because you get to be so present with yourself while also being present with others, which is such a rare experience for most of us. We then spend 2-hour chunks in deep conversation about each of the 3 papers and their specific topic. And we structure our conversations carefully, allowing everyone time to reflect and share insights and go all the way around the circle before back and forth dialogue begins. This whole gathering feels like a time out of time. Nowhere else in our lives and ministries do any of us carve out that much time for sharing and reflection and learning, particularly about one particular topic. I've been doing this now with them for 5 years, and I'm still surprised every year how different the experience feels, how it always seems to unlock something in me, a different way of being that invites more spaciousness, more ease, more openness. I hear myself and my own thoughts differently. I am tuned into my body differently. And I have learned in those spaces that I don't have to know what I'm going to say in advance. I don't have to plan it while someone else is talking. That sometimes the conversation unlocks new thoughts and insights, and I trust myself to share them even if they are not fully formed, because I know they will be received without judgment. Parker Palmer clarifies that the inner teacher is not a moral arbiter or conscience, but rather a voice of identity and integrity. And when we are in touch with our inner teacher and we trust ourselves, we can overcome barriers of ego, external expectations, societal pressures that hinder our ability to live authentically. Not perfectly, but authentically. Perfectly ourselves, just like Norman. I have found this gathering and this group of colleagues to be transformational. Carving out this supported, uninterrupted time to explore ideas and share our lives has allowed me to grow my own trust for myself, to listen to my inner teacher in new ways, and to practice that authentic living. But I've also discovered there is another part to trusting ourselves that is equally important. Perhaps even a foundational building block. And that is self-acceptance and self-love, like Norman taught us this morning. Learning to love ourselves, wings and all, is how we get to trusting ourselves. If we cannot love ourselves, if we succumb to the messages that we are not enough, how can we ever hope to truly hear that inner teacher? The challenge is that we are surrounded by messages that attempt to make us question our worth at every turn, creating societal roadblocks to this vital part of self that can get so easily lost. When teachers, for example, get told they should remove "everyone is welcome" banners from their classroom, What message is that sending our young people about their own self-worth, self-love, and belonging? Now, more than ever, we need to create communities and circles of trust and cultivate them. Places where we can feel truly seen and heard, where we can always be searching for answers because, like our reading said, not because we are half-formed, but because we are brilliant enough to keep growing. Places where people listen without judgment, where people affirm and validate without problem-solving or fixing. And these spaces, they don't have to be highly structured retreats in the woods like my minister's study group, although that is one excellent model worth experiencing from time to time. But we can collectively cultivate small, simple, connected, supported spaces anytime we gather. That is part of why we exist as a spiritual and religious community. We can create spaces that give all of us an opportunity to get quiet, to listen deeply, to cultivate our own self-love, and to learn and remember how to trust ourselves. Perhaps we can be a religion that not only proclaims the power of love, but also how that love that is always with us, that love that will not ever let us go, that love that blesses us from its infinite well, that love that reminds us that we are worthy, that love is all we need to know we can and should trust ourselves. That love is all we need to know we can access our own inner wisdom and inner teacher anytime without an intermediary, unless we want one. We need to create spaces to get quiet and be still and listen to our heart's own longing and listen to what calls us in the silence and to know that we are loved and we are love. May it always be so. Amen. I'm going to invite us into a time of meditation to practice together, to practice getting quiet, holding space for one another to listen to that inner wisdom and inner teacher. So I'll invite you to take a few breaths together. And remember, we are cultivating a quietness within our soul, which doesn't always mean a quietness with our external surroundings. And as you get quiet, I invite you to ask that inner teacher, what is it that you need to know right now? What is it that you need right now? Spirit of life, may we trust ourselves enough to hear our inner teacher and receive our inner wisdom and truly listen. Amen. Even in a large populated community, we work to create this kind of space of deep listening and connection, to hear and receive and carry one another's joys and sorrows and milestones, so that we remind ourselves that we do not journey through this life alone, and we forge those deep bonds of community and connection. Today we share these joys and sorrows with you. Diana Barrero-Lowe shares her deep gratitude and thanks for all the care she has received from this community after her retina surgery on December 12th, the fabulous meal train, all of the rides because she couldn't drive. She says, thanks for the great friends at Booth who have been giving me rides. I always feel the love here. And we hold in our hearts George Raino, who recently had surgery to remove a squamous cell cancer from his right lymph node in his neck. As we see, he's healing well, and he'll begin radiation soon. And we hold Krista O'Connor and the O'Connor family in our hearts and prayers, as Krista's father, Randy, is in the hospital after a stroke revealed brain lesions and the return of an aggressive type of lymphoma. If you are holding someone in your heart this morning, I invite you to speak their name aloud or share it in the chat so that we might hold them with you. May the arms of this community hold all our joys and sorrows, those spoken aloud and those that remain silent and close to our hearts. Let us together take a deep breath in and out, releasing the sorrows of the world knows too well, finding comfort in our community here with one another, recognizing that we are part of this whole and holy community where joy and woe are woven fine. Blessed be. Let's sing together. Sometimes music, as I was experiencing with George and Cindy earlier, and singing together is also a way we can unlock that inner teacher and inner wisdom and learn to trust what is bubbling up inside ourselves. So I invite us to rise, embody your spirit, to sing together hymn number 1015 in our teal hymnal, words on the screen, I Know I Can. Friends, I invite you to place your hands over your heart for our closing blessing. Trust is never perfect, just as we are never perfect. It is an ongoing practice, ever unfolding. May we take time to listen, to create spaces to know our inner teacher, and may you hear these words from this pulpit. You can trust yourself. Wisdom lives within you, guided, shaped, led, always by love. Blessed are we all. Go in peace.